let me give you just a little bit, mamish, a couple minutes of just a thought of where this came from. So, there's a Messiah that we have from the Tzaddikim that if a person is learning and they find Hashgacha Pratis in their learning, it's a simon that it's Tar Lishma, or it's within the world of Tar Lishma. So, Al Pishnayim Eidim Yakum Davar, there are two stories of Hashgacha Pratis of like what, revolving this little Seder that we're going to start right now. So I was sitting with one of the Chevra a couple weeks ago, and I was just, I'm always thinking about different ways how to connect with you guys and grow together. And so I just had this thought. I said, and this is what I said. I said that it used to be, back in the day in Europe, every shtetl and every shtibel, there was always like, big brains learning Gemara Bian, but every shtetl and every shtibel had people learning Mishnayos and Ein Yaakov, and that's the way it was. That's always the way it was. But I said, like, now we're in America and we're like so smart and we're so sophisticated, so it's like beneath us to learn Pasha Mishnayos. But I said, I think it would be a good idea to bring it back, and that's where this thing came from. So I left speaking with my friend, and then I went to a particular base medrash to go look something up. Happens to be the thing I was looking up, they didn't have. So why Hashem Yisparach make me go to that base medrash? I opened the door, and literally, as I'm opening the door to the base medrash, there's a guy sitting there, and these are the words coming out of his mouth. It used to be, he says this, battling, whatever. It used to be that back in Europe, every shtetl and every shtibel had chaver learning Mishnayos and Ein Yaakov, but now no one does it anymore. So I said, okay, Rabbanu Shalom, I hear it. Close the door. That was message number one. That there's Torah Lishma going on up here, Baruch Hashem. Rabbanu Shalom is paying attention to our learner. The second, Al Pishnayim Eidim Yakum Davar, the second aspect of Hashgacha Pratis is the fact that we're starting this in Parshas Chukas. So this week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu is told to speak to the rock, right? He hits the rock, but you should have spoken to the rock. So the Tikkun Zohar, without explaining too much, but the Tikkun Zohar says that the word the Chumash uses in this week's Parsha for the rock that Moshe was supposed to speak to was Sela. That's the word Sela. So it says, the Tikkun Zohar says that the word Sela is a combination of Al Samach, and that's a reference to the fact that the Rabbanu Shalom's presence is residing over the Shishay Sidrei Mishnah, the 60 Masechtas of Shas. The 60 Masechtas of Shas, that's Al Samach. So you already have a remez in this parsha to the Inyan of learning Mishnayos. So evidently, someone over here is learning Torah Lishma. So it should be a good sim for all of us, And it makes sense that you should see Hashgacha Pratis when you're learning Torah Lishma. What's Torah Lishma about? Why we learn? Torah Lishma means to learn to connect to Hashem. And that means that Hashem's presence is involved in the learning. If Hashem's presence is involved, it means you're going to find Hashgacha Pratis. So, with that, Hashem should help us. We should be zochet to learn Torah Lishma. Okay, so let's learn. So let's begin Maseches Brachos, the first parak, Mishna Aleph. So again, it's not going to be fancy or sophisticated or complicated. It's just a matter of going through Mishnayos and just covering Shas, hopefully, Bez Hashem, and making siyum after siyum, God willing. So if those that are here that are looking for Kedushin, I'm sorry. It's probably going to be more pashut just going through Mishnayos. But we'll see what comes our way. Okay, so Maseches Brachos begins talking about the topic of the mitzvah of Kriyishma. So just to explain again, very simply, when it comes to reading Kriyishma every single day, there's really three dimensions or three layers to that inyan of saying Kriyishma. There's the side of Kriyishma, which is a mitzvah from the Torah, and the mitzvah from the Torah is to read those parshas of Kriyishma twice a day, b'shachlecha u'v'kamecha, when you lie down and when you get up, at night and in the morning. That's the dimension of Kriyishma, which is Midoraisa. Fine, and it stands on its own 2 feet. You say Kriyishma in the morning, you say Kriyishma at night, you fulfill the mitzvah of Kriyishma. That's Midoraisa. Then there's another dimension of Kriyishma, and this is going to be, we'll see throughout the Masechta, sort of flowing through this. The second dimension of Kriyishma is that Kriyishma was then taken by Chazal and turned into a part of davening. So besides Kriyishma of the morning being its own mitzvah, it's also part of Shachris. And so to fulfill the mitzvah of davening Shachris, you say Kriyishma of Shemon Esrei. And the same thing with Ma'ariv. Kriyishma of nighttime is on its own You say Kriya Shema at night, that's fulfilling mitzvah midiraisa of Kriya Shema. But it was also instituted and packaged within Ma'ariv. So now Ma'ariv has Kriya Shema to it. That's the second layer of Kriya Shema, and that's Midrabanan. And then you have a third dimension of Kriya Shema, which is not Midraisa, not even Midrabanan, but more of an Eitzah Taiva, I guess you can say, something that Chazal recommend, which is Kriya Shema Lamita, which is to say Kriya Shema before you go to bed. And the Indian of saying Kriya Shema before you go to sleep, and Chazal, the way they explained it, is that it's more of a shemir, it's a protection for the neshama, that when you go to bed at night, the last thing on your lips should be something about Emunah. It allows the transition of your neshama to Shemaim in an easier and a better way. I mentioned this before also, is that according to the Arizal, everyone needs upgrades. You always need upgrades, with technology and with your neshama. Sometimes you sort of hit your ceiling and you need an upgrade. So when is the time of the upgrade? So the upgrade could happen when a person is sleeping at night. A person can be given the next morning deeper neshama, bigger neshama. And so the Rizal said, but that could only really happen properly when you say Kriya Shema Lamita. So what is Kriya Shema Lamita? So if you look in the Siddur, what's daunting sometimes is just like, it's like a bunch of pages and it's long and it's hard to memorize. But very often when it's important just to do the basics and to do them, as opposed to being overwhelmed by all the extra stuff. Basically, what Kriya Shema Lamita is, according to Chazal, is just saying Kriya Shema, and not even all three paragraphs, pretty much just the first paragraph, although it's better if you can say all three, and one or two psukim, as the Gemara calls it, psukim of Rachamim. So psukim that you know already by heart, maybe Birchas Kahanim or Kibbutz Tehillim, something that you know by heart. When you look in the Siddur, so from the Rizal and Kabbalah, so there's a lot of other psukim added to it, but that's the basic idea. So those are the three dimensions of Kriya Shema. Again, Midraisa, morning and evening, morning and night. Midrabanan, part of Shachris and Ma'ariv. And then sort of Eitzah Taiva, Kriya Shema Lamita. Okay, so the Mishna, Mesechus Brachos, the beginning of Masechta, the first few prakim are going to be talking about Kriya Shema, but on the Deraisa level, right? The mitzvah of Kriya Shema in the morning and Kriya Shema in the evening. Okay, so Zak the Mishnah. So when it comes to the mitzvah of Kriya Shema Deraisa, that mitzvah to say Kriya Shema at night, when is the beginning of the demarcation point when you can start saying Kriya Shema? When's the end? When's the time frame of Kriya Shema of night? So says the Mishnah, so says the Mishnah, the first opinion of the Mishnah is the window of time is not all night. The window of time is from the moment when Kahanim are able to eat Truma till the end of the first watch. Now, what does that mean? So again, basic halacha, that we know that one of the mitzvahs in the Torah is to give Truma. So a person has a farm in Eretz Yisrael, so you have to give Truma and Maises. What's Truma? So Truma is you give a little bit. Let's say you have a barley field, so you give a little bit of a barley bean to the kayin. That's called Truma, and that's the mitzvah of Truma. How much should you give? So technically, even one little barley bean can take care of an entire farm. Chazal said you can't even call it Rabbanan. Chazal estimated that in ayin yafa, that a recommended amount would be a 50th. Give a 50th of your field to the kain. That's called truma. So the kain then receives it, and he has a mitzvah from the Torah to eat it. But he could only eat it if he's tahar. Let's say a kain becomes tameh. So depending on the severity of the tumah, the halacha is that if a kain becomes tameh, he has to go to the mikveh. And once he goes to the mikveh, he waits till sunset. He waits till the nighttime. And then once nightfall comes after he went to the mikveh that day, now he can start eating truma. That's the halacha. So what does it mean, the nightfall, for truma purposes? So the halacha is tzeis hakechavim. Once three stars are seen at night, so he goes to the mikveh in the middle of the afternoon, whatever it is, comes that night, he sees 3 stars, boom, that's called night, and now he could eat truma. That's the halacha. So says the Mishnah, that time of when 3 stars come out, that it would allow a kayin that went to the mikveh that day to eat truma, that's also the beginning of Kriya Shema. That's also the beginning of when you can say Kriya Shema, not just the kayin, any person. That's called Mishash HaKahanim Nichnasim Lechel B'Trumasim. When a kayin is allowed, is able to go in to his home after being in the mikveh and spending time doing whatever he's doing. When he comes home, when there's 3 stars in the sky, that's when he can eat truma. And that's also the Zman of saying Kriya Shema. Ad Saif Hashmur Rishayna, that's the beginning of the window. And the end of the window, according to the first opinion in the Mishnah, is the end of the first watch. In other words, if you take the nighttime, which is 12 hours, and you divide it into 3 parts, so the first part is going to be 4 hours. So that, if you take the nighttime, which is, 12 hours, divided into 4 parts, so it's 4 quarters, the first quarter is going to be 3 hours. That's the first watch, so to speak. That's your window of saying Kriya Shema. So from the time of when 3 stars appear until the end of the first watch, the end of the first quarter of the night, Divrei Rebbe Eliezer, that's the opinion of Rebbe Eliezer. So the truth is, the Gemara in the beginning of Brachas already asks, why doesn't the Mishnah just say straight that you could say Kriya Shema from the time that 3 stars appear until the end of the first watch? Why does it say like the time the Kahanim were Tameh, they go to the mikveh, and then at nightfall they can eat truma? What does nightfall mean for them? It means when 3 stars appear. Oh, that's also for Kriya Shema. So the Gemara asks such a question, and the Gemara says the Mishnah is using this as an opportunity to teach us new halachas. We never heard of Kahanim eating truma before, and when they could eat truma. So now we have an opportunity to learn. Okay, maybe at the end we'll speak about that for a second. But anyway, that's the first opinion of the Mishnah, Divrei Rebbe Eliezer. Now the Mishnah records other opinions that disagree, not at the beginning part, but at the end part. Until when can you say Kriya Shema? So again, the first opinion was until the end of the first quarter of the night. The Chacham say no, not like a Eliezer, ad chatzos. You can go all the way till midnight. By the way, when we're talking about midnight and quarters and a few hours, we should know that this is not talking about hours that we calculate of 60 minutes. It's what's called in halacha shos zmanius. What does shos zmanius mean? Shos zmanius means that in halacha, a day is always 12 hours and night is always 12 hours. Now, which basically means that whatever amount of time daylight is that time of year, you just cut that into 12 pieces, that's 12 hours. And nighttime also, cut into 12 pieces, that's 12 hours. So in the winter, even if nighttime is longer than daytime, we always divide it up into 12 even pieces. So when we talk about midnight, it means 6 hours into the night. How long is that? Well, sometimes it's 12 o'clock at night, sometimes it's 1 o'clock, sometimes it's 11:45. It depends on the time of year, because it's always going to be 6 hours into the night. And the hours of the nighttime are just a twelfth of nighttime. So whenever time of the year is, it's just always divided into pieces of 12. That's why the zmanim in halacha always fluctuate, because it's not in halacha it's set, so it's always midnight or it's always 3 hours into the night. Those zmanim are set, but how much that is practically always changes based on the calendar, based on the time of the year. So Chacham say until midnight. Rav Gamliel extends it even further. No, that for Kriya Shema, the nighttime, it begins when 3 stars come out, but it goes all the way until sunrise, until the next one. So you have the whole night to say Kriya Shema. Again, this is talking about Kriya Shema of the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, the deraisa. Then the Mishnah records a story. Maisa Shabo Banav Beis HaMishna. So it's a Maisa that the children of Gamliel came from a party, presumably a nice holy one. So they come back from the party to Rav Gamliel, and it's already late at night. And Amrulai, and they said to their father, like Karina Shema, we didn't say Shema yet, so what should we do? It was already past the first quarter of the night, and it was even past midnight. So did we miss our opportunity? So Amr Lahem, so Rav Gamliel responds, and he says like this. He says, if the sun didn't come up yet, then chayav mata likros, then you're still obligated and still able to read Kriya Shema. So he's saying like himself. In other words, you can read all the way till the morning. And now, even though it's true that was Rav Gamliel's personal opinion, but L'maisa the Chacham said until midnight. So usually the halacha is like majority. So Rav Gamliel, what he should tell his sons is, listen, I personally held that it's until the morning, but what can I tell you? My colleagues disagree, and we go with them, and they said until midnight. But Rav Gamliel didn't do that. Rav Gamliel said his opinion. Why? So he explains, because you should know. Even when my colleagues, they said until midnight, it wasn't a hard line in the sand that after midnight you can't do it anymore. When Chachamim said until midnight, it means mitzvah sanat sheyalmad hashachar. Really, really, technically, it's all the way till the next morning. So why did they say until midnight? So as we'll see, the Mishnah will tell us because they want to give us a lechatchila time frame that we shouldn't just be lazy about it and push it off, and the next thing you know, you wake up and it's already the next day and you missed it. But technically speaking, so therefore they put that lechatchila midnight, but technically speaking, it's the whole night. Says Rav Gamliel, not only is this true for Kriya Shema, that technically it's the whole night, and Chazal are just giving you a chumrah until midnight to do, but really if you miss that point of midnight, you can do the rest of the night as well. That's not only for Kriya Shema, that's true throughout Shabbos. Whenever you find a time limit of midnight, it's never really such a strict time limit. It just means lechatchila, but you can move on to go to the next morning, to the next morning as well. It says a few examples. Hektar chalav ve'varim. The Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Zvachim. Mishnah says that in the Beis Hamikdash, the sacrifices were brought during the day, but the parts of the animal that had to be burnt on the mizbeach could be burnt until midnight. Mitzvasan says Rav Gamliel, mitzvasan achiyal minashachar. Really, doesn't mean midnight. It means until the next morning. We said till midnight that we shouldn't be lazy about it, but technically it's the next morning as well. Or another example, if you have a sacrifice which is allowed to be eaten for one day, and a day means, in terms of eating karbanos, it means the day that it was sacrificed, that it was offered, and the following night. So you'll see in the Mishnah, it'll say that it could be eaten today and tonight until midnight. It doesn't mean midnight mamish and that's it. It means lechatchila, you should try to eat it by midnight. If you missed it, then you can still eat it until the next morning. So then said Rav Gamliel, so why did Chazal say this point of chatzais if really it's not a hard line? So it's to distance a person from doing an aver. In other words, we want a person to take Kriya Shema seriously, and we know that at night a person gets involved with supper and going to bed and resting, and the next thing you know, it can be the next morning. So we made this Indian of midnight. Okay, let's do the next Mishnah, and then maybe we'll spend a few minutes explaining why this is the beginning of Shas. So it says the next Mishnah, that was in terms of the Zman of Kriya Shema of the nighttime. Then says the Mishnah, what about the mitzvah of Kriya Shema in the morning? When's the time frame for that? So says the Mishnah like this: the beginning of saying Kriya Shema in the morning is Mishayakir ben Tchelas Alav. It's the time when you're able, when there's enough light, the sun rose enough that you can see the difference. You can tell the difference without using lamps or obviously light bulbs, just using the sun to see the difference between the color Tchelas and the color white, between blue and white. So there is a machlekes, by the way, between Rashi and Tosfos and the Gemara. Like, what does that mean? So according to Rashi says it means that if you have a piece of wool that's blue and a piece of wool that's white, if you can see the difference between one and the other, that's when you can start saying Kriya Shema. Tosfos says that it's unlikely for that to be the meaning of the Mishnah, because even if it's very dark outside, and there's just a little bit of light, even from the moon, you could probably tell the difference between a whole thing of wool that's blue and a whole thing of wool that's white. So Tosfos says what it means is it's referring to tzitzis. So a person has tzitzis with blue strings and white strings, and they're all mixed up together. So if there's enough light, if the sun came up enough that you can tell the difference in your tzitzis between Tchelas and Lavan, that's called enough light to do this. And by the way, the reason why the Zman of Kriya Shema is so it feels like random, like just a specific time that we're picking an arbitrary thing, is because the pasuk doesn't say, there are certain mitzvahs that the pasuk says do this by the daytime. So day and night, we know what day and night is. That's not what the pasuk says when it comes to Kriya Shema. The pasuk says by Kriya Shema that this man is b'shach b'cha uvkumecha, when you lie down and when you get up. Now people go to bed at night and they wake up in the morning, but it's not exactly the moment of sunrise people are out of bed or not. So it's a little bit vague still. What is the time of getting up? What is the time of going to bed? So that's why it's a little bit vague. So that's where the Mishnah is coming from over here. The time of getting up, when do people get up? So it's going to be around sunrise. At least that's the way, normal people used to live, getting up at sunrise. So, but it's not going to be mamish that moment of sunrise. It'll be give or take sunrise. And that's what the Mishnah is trying to figure out. So the first opinion is when you can tell the difference between Tchelas and Lavan. Rav Lezer says not between blue and white. That's too stark of a contrast. Between blue and green. That's a little bit more subtle, and that's the amount of light that signals the beginning of Kriya Shema. Okay, what about the end of Kriya Shema? How long do you have? So says the Mishnah, until full sunrise. So according to the first opinion, the window of creation in the morning is very small. It's from the time that you can tell the difference between blue and white or blue and green until the entire sun is over the horizon. It's a small window. Rabbi Yeshua says no, ad shalosh shayos, that you have 3 hours into the morning. Again, take whatever the time of day, daylight hours divided into 12. The first 3 hours, that's your window of saying Kriya Shema. Why? Says Rabbi Yeshua, the issue is, again, when do people wake up? It doesn't say in Chumash that you should say Kriya Shema during the day. It says you say Kriya Shema when people get up. So the first opinion is, well, people wake up in that window. They wake up from a little bit before sunrise to the end of sunrise. That's when people get up. Rabbi Yeshua agrees, but says Rabbi Yeshua, but there are people that stay in bed until a few hours after sunrise. Princes, royalty, people that are not, struggling, working in the fields, so they could take a little bit easier. And their time of waking up is in that window of before sunrise till the 3 hours into the day. And so for Kriya Shema purposes, the mitzvah is to say Kriya Shema when people wake up. And so says Rabbi Yeshua, that means that includes the time frame of even B'nai Malach. Hakar Makan Ve'elech, a person, let's say, misses those windows, whether it be Kriya Shema at night or Kriya Shema in the morning, and you read Kriya Shema past that time. Okay, Lo Yihisik Adam Hakar B'Torah. It's learning, it's Torah, it's not bad, but in terms of the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, a person missed that opportunity to do the mitzvah properly. Okay. Mishna Gimel. Now, we talked about the Zman of Kriya Shema. When could Kriya Shema be said during the day, and when could Kriya Shema be said at night? By the way, there's an interesting thing, just to make the observation, is that when it comes to Kriya Shema of the morning, it's clear from the Mishnah that the window is when people wake up, the time of getting out of bed. And the question was, when do people get out of bed? But that's your window. But Kriya Shema of the night, it's not like that. The Kriya Shema of the night, the time is not when people go to bed, but it's the time when people are sleeping. And so Kriya Shema of the nighttime, we saw Rav Gamliel said, it's really all night long. Not because all night people are going to bed, because all night is when people are sleeping. So it's interesting is that Chazal, for whatever reason, understood that when it says B'shach b'cha uvkumecha, they're not really, contrasting each other 100%. B'shach b'cha means when people are going to sleep and remaining asleep. That's for the nighttime Kriya Shema. And uvkumecha means when they get out of bed, not when they're awake, but when they get out of bed. So it's a little bit of a contrast over there. Rishonim talk about that. Why is that? But that's the tradition that Chazal had in terms of understanding these psukim. Okay, so that's in terms of the Zman of Kriya Shema. That's in terms of the Zman of Kriya Shema. Okay, I'm already past my time. I'm sorry. I feel bad schlepping you guys along. So I guess we'll stop here. But one last thing that just kedai to mention over here. Why does Torah Sheba'al Peh, just mamish for a minute, why does Torah Sheba'al Peh begin with this? If you think about it, it's not just like the first mistake. Like this is the beginning of Torah Sheba'al Peh. The first halacha of Torah Sheba'al Peh is discussing Kriya Shema of the nighttime, and specifically the time and when to start it, when Kahanim become tahar to eat truma. So very much bekitzer, what's Torah Sheba'al Peh? What's Torah Sheba'al Peh? Torah Sheba'al Peh is Hashem speaks to us, that's Torah Sheba'al. But we don't know anything, we're all confused, we're not sitting in the dark, but we try to claw our way up back to God, that's called Torah Sheba'al Peh. So the whole inyan of Torah Sheba'al Peh is about a Jew who's in darkness, a Jew who's in confusion, a person who's really a kohen, who's a shliach of the Rebbeinu Shalom, sent to this world to change the world. That's what a Jew is. But that Jew, that kohen, finds himself in a state of tumah. But he's clawing, he's trying to find himself to get to a place where he could eat truma. Truma means, the Arizal said the word truma is a combination of two words, tarum hey, to pick up the last hey of Hashem's name. The last day of Hashem's name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, always represents this world and the Jewish people, things, this world. Tarum hey, truma means the kohen is sent with a mission to be in this place and to somehow uplift this world. That's truma. And the way we uplift the world is through emunah, through connecting to Hashem, through believing in Hashem, mamish, in darkest of places. And that's exactly what Torah Sheba'al Peh is. What the environment that Torah Sheba'al Peh thrives in is darkness. That's the environment that Torah Shabbat thrives in. Torah Shabbat, to be a Navi, that needs clarity. But to be a person that is a Torah Shabbat Yid, it's a person that's a Makayan, that's coming from a much higher place, but finds himself in the middle of the night being Tameh and clawing his way to Amunah. That's what Torah Shabbat is. And every single Mishnah throughout all of Shas, from Brachas all the way to the end of Nida, is one long effort on the Jewish people's part to try to climb back to that light and to emerge out of that darkness to be able to find Hashem. And when we put in the energy to find Hashem by clawing our way back to the surface, then we're much stronger for it than before we were involved in that clawing. No, okay, Hashem should help us that just as we started this and started Lishma, we're learning why does a person learn? For one simple reason, to come close to Hashem, to come close to Kriyishma, to that Yichud, that Hashem Elkein Hashem Echad. No? So Hashem should bless us, to continue learning all the way from Brachas, all the way till Nida, to make many siyumim and just make Hashem happy and connect with each other. And looking forward to see you guys in Shabbos.